Hello everybody, welcome to episode 36 of the Aurelia city. Last week we did something different and built a highway interchange together with some outlines of the infrastructure that's going to somewhat define the shapes for the surrounding area. Like I mentioned last time, I do have some plans for the place by the river next to the interchange, but for now we need to follow the general plan for this larger area, which is the huge city park that we need to build around. One place in particular where we can easily continue building is the opposite side of the residential hill, which is nicely prepared for some finishing touches. We need to expand that place using similar style as before, and we also need to extend the tram line that goes next to it. So let's go. Okay, so like I said, we need to finish this side of the residential hill, which is actually going to see very similar style as, the opposite side, opposite of that tram corridor that we built in the middle of that hill. Now, these two places are obviously not going to be symmetrical, so I'm just going to have to use something slightly different, but I am going to use the similar style, or pretty much the same style as on the other side. So I'm going to use the same looking buildings and all that, which is actually very nice, very convenient, because it allows me to do it very quickly, to build on this side of the hill very quickly, because it's, like I said, pretty much the same thing. So it's not really going to be, designing or figuring out how it needs to be built or what needs to be there, what kinds of buildings and all that, because it's already decided, from the opposite side, right? Simple. So I'm going to use even these kinds of shapes of roads, just like on the other side, especially for those I don't know how those are called, the buildings that I just placed, right? So I'm going to place them a lot more in this part of this block district, whatever you want to call it, because they just look all right in this place. And like I said, I just want to have it very similar to the opposite side. Now, this part of the hill on this side of the corridor is not going to be as tall as the second one, as the first one, I should say. Even though I think it is going to be very similar in terms of height. I don't think that it is going to have the same number of levels. I think it's only going to have like a 3 or maybe 2.5 levels, really, because it's only going to have the level of the corridor, where the corridor is, having the roof of it, and then something in between, and obviously down on the surface where those rounded buildings are. So those rounded buildings actually were already placed, I think when I was building the bridge, actually, I already placed something on this side because, it kind of needed to be done back when I was doing the residential bridge, because the road that goes on the opposite side of the hill, like the main road where, we have the buses right now, it needed to be done when I was doing the bridge. So it's actually very nice to always go to these kinds of places that are already, prepared like this to just finish them. All right, so I almost placed all the buildings on the side of that hill, and now we need to just expand this place and do something, figure something to do with this tram line that was obviously ending when it went underneath that transfer station, where we obviously have the two stations for this line that goes directly from the downtown, and this other line which is forming some sort of like a circular, no, how would you call it? Actually some kind of like a circular line. Well, not really circular, like complete circle at this point, but a line that kind of goes around the downtown. Now that line then continues to the bridge, and it's probably going to continue somewhere, on the other side of the river. But this line is directly going from the downtown, like I said, and I was not exactly sure where it's going to go from here, but I think I'm going to talk a bit more about it later. Right now, I really want to just talk about what's happening on the screen right now. So this road that I built in here is going to mark the outline of the park, and at the edge of the park in here, I wanted to have some slightly bigger buildings, residential buildings. Of course, we still need to increase the residential areas of the city. You can clearly see that with the green bar what are those called? I completely forgot the word for it. Demand, yes. The residential demand is very high here. So we still need to provide a lot of those buildings. So I just put those very nice looking, very modern looking residential buildings in there. 4 of them. The first one is slightly shorter than the rest of them. Kind of looks good, makes sense. And the tram, the tracks and the line is obviously going through this block. I decided that I'm going to keep it slightly sunken, and this is probably going to lead me to talk more about where it's going to go. So now that I think of it, this line, these tracks, they actually don't really go to the surface anywhere. Even in the downtown, they don't really cross the roads, right? The car roads, right? They don't really go anywhere near where other forms of transportation are, so cars and all that. They do cross some like pedestrian paths, so I can't really treat this. Let's say this line, these tracks as some sort of like a proper light railroad, I suppose, because it just doesn't really feel all that right. Even though I could probably treat this tram line, especially in these places where it's already not in the downtown, I could probably treat it as some sort of a light rail, something like that. Now, yeah, sure. Before you get your pitchforks out and tell me how light railways look absolutely completely different than this, and use different vehicles and all that. There are many different light rail systems in the world, and other than, for example, in the London area, where you have like a proper light railroad, which kind of looks like a metro in terms of the vehicles and how stations look like and all that. But there are many different systems, like I said, and some systems actually do use tram vehicles, regular street cars, you probably would call them in America, but they use it just like they would for normal trains. Some of the systems actually have same gauges as well, so they can use even the train tracks if they wanted to. And in some situations, in some cities, even slightly small cities actually, in this country and many different countries, they are actually using those trams to maybe even travel between cities or connect all kinds of various suburbs to the downtown of the city. So that's kind of what I would like to do here with this track. And that's kind of the reasoning behind why I want to have it in this little trench, let's say, and have it completely separated from all kinds of roads and even pedestrian paths, as we can see here, because I did that overpass. So again, I'm probably going to just focus on what's happening on the screen right now, and then I'm probably going to continue talking about what I'm going to do with these tracks. So we are creating a stop, right? Obviously. Now the stop is right in the middle of this residential area on the side of those high, tall buildings, right? Now it's obviously completely separated from the tracks. People don't really need to cross the tracks if they don't want to, but they can obviously do that. It's perfectly fine if they are paying attention, so that the tram is not going to run over them. But they have the stairs on both sides of this trench, and just like you guys mentioned in the comments, I should probably do some elevators every once in a while and not just use stairs, obviously, so that everyone can reach the platforms. Well, it's not really platforms, just the stop, right? So I'm using these new elevator buildings. I think they are made by Ronix, and you don't see it in here, but these elevators are actually animated. If you download it from the workshop together with the animation mod, I'm not sure what it's called, then they are going to actually have the how do you call the moving thing in an elevator? I mean, you probably would call it the elevator, right? The cabin, maybe? Yeah, so it actually has the moving cabin, this elevator model from the workshop. Obviously, if you have it with the animation mod, and if you are not using it as procedural object, which I'm doing in here, because right when I was subscribing to these elevators, I already knew that I would need to use procedural objects with them, because I need to customize it for the height that I have in here. And obviously, the elevator is actually not the same height on both sides. We can clearly see that with this pedestrian overpass, like it's going from different heights, right, on both sides. So in the future, I'm definitely going to use these elevators a lot more, because they are just amazing. They look absolutely amazing. And I have even seen the animation for it, and it's really, really great looking. So in some future places, I probably will do it the other way around. I will probably build around the elevator, around the height of the elevator, so that I can have it, you know, in its original form, even with the animation. So that's it for this tram stop. Later I'm going to, yes, you can see it over here, I'm going to switch the concrete underneath those tracks to something else. I decided to just use surface painter, even though it's not ideal surface. In here I would rather have just a green grass in there, but you know, it's kind of difficult to do that because I would need to use maybe some pulpable surface, probably switched for procedural object, because this place is sloped. The tracks are sloped, so that would not exactly be easy, or, you know, well, it would be possible, just not easy, right? So I just use the surface painter, and we have it like this. It's not all that terrible, but yeah, grass would have been better. All right, so now back to the tracks. So I'm creating this kind of an overpass for cars, just doing very, very simple supports here on the other side, using obviously the concrete wall and all that, and some detailing. I'm pretty much going to cover every surface that I can, procedural objects, obviously, and even going to cover the shadows on the road, obviously formed by the cliffs underneath it. Now, this track, again, so like I said, I think I'm going to treat it from here onward, I guess, as some sort of a light railroad. And like I mentioned before, this particular track, this particular line is actually not really crossing the surface even in the downtown. So I was actually thinking that for this particular line, and probably this line only, I am going to switch it for different vehicles. I already downloaded, like, I think that from day one of Aurelia, I already have different vehicles for trams that I kind of considered for the city, but never used them. I'm just using the washing machine trams because I really, really like them for the city and for all kinds of places in the city. But I think that I'm going to treat this railroad as more like a higher capacity, like I said, some kind of a lighter railroad, right? So this kind of means that I'm already deciding what's going to be, you know, further down this way, further away from the downtown. Because if I'm already going to go this way and switch this track for some kind of a higher capacity solution, then it kind of means that, you know, it needs to go somewhere where a lot of people live, which means that we need to put some, probably some tall buildings or maybe something like that, or at least a lot of buildings in some sort of like a, I'm not sure how to call it in English actually, like a residential estate area, maybe it's called something like that. Basically just a lot of buildings. They don't need to be exactly tall, but just a lot of buildings where a lot of people live. Right? That's what I wanted to say right from the start. Okay, so like I said, this track has some meaning. So it's not exactly going to have like a super high capacity trams and then it's going to end nowhere. That wouldn't really make much sense. So I'm doing it like this. Now, that's obviously some plans for the future. It's kind of interesting that I already have a lot of plans for the future. It's kind of interesting that, we already kind of created the basic idea for really a lot of places around the city by just, building the core of the city and just, doing some tiny little extensions, let's say, which is just defining what needs to be built, further away from them. For example, this hill area, like I said, one side of the hill was built in, certain style, so it was clear that the opposite side is going to be the same, and it was really, really easy to build that. Just like I did, for example, the big park. It's kind of clear how I need to build around this park. And even back on the other side of the city, it's also kind of decided already how it needs to be. And I'm kind of making it sound like it's a negative thing, but on the contrary, it's actually super, super good that it's like this, because it's going to allow me to build stuff reasonably quickly. And it's really nice that, the city kind of follows one particular style. Now, some of you guys commented, and this is actually a common theme for some of the comments, even for the previous videos, that some of the stuff is not realistic in the city. And, Yes, that's entirely true. I'm not really hiding the fact that the city is not realistic. It's supposed to be like a, fictional, somewhat futuristic theme. So some of the things in the city are not realistic, and that's perfectly fine. That was the intention. I'm not claiming that the city is realistic. So some things obviously are not. I mean, we built a residential bridge, so kind of realism is, was thrown out of the window with that project. So that's kind of clear. Pretty much everyone knows that who's following the series from the start, right? I think I even mentioned it in the first video. Anyway, there's kind of a lot of things to still talk about in terms of the future plans for these particular areas. It's kind of really interesting that. Or maybe it's just, my imagination that it already is set how it needs to be built. But I think it really is. I think that the city, the way it is built right now, it is already determining how it needs to be, expanded, which is, like I said, very, very nice thing to do. A nice state that the city is in, let's say. All right, so we're almost at the end of today's video. I'm still going to place down some trees and some things like that, but yeah, that's almost it. Now, I still want to mention that second series that I already mentioned last week, but I kind of didn't have it already prepared for the release this week. But I think I'm going to release the first video for the new series on either Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not exactly sure yet, but don't worry, Aurelia is not ending. It is not ending. Let me say that again. It is going to continue. Next Sunday, it's going to have another episode 37. And we are obviously going to aim towards episode 40, which is going to be the cinematic episode that's going to recap everything that was done, just like we did with episode 20, almost half a year ago, which is kind of interesting. All right, so stay tuned for all the new stuff that's going to be released very, very soon. And obviously stay tuned for the next video of Aurelia as well, guys. Now, I also have to mention all the YouTube stuff, as always. If you like the video, then you can put a thumbs up underneath it, share the video with your friends or with whoever you might think might find this interesting. And you can always subscribe to the channel if you are new here. Thank you again for watching this video, guys. I will see you with some next video. Take care. Goodbye.